Welcome back to Part 3, Manipulating Data. In this part, we'll demonstrate how to insert new data into a database and how to manipulate and change existing data in a database. Recall that CRUD stands for Creating, Retrieving, Updating, and Destroying Data. We'll cover the creation of data first, which involves inserting new records into a table. When inserting data, you generally provide the values for each column of a record that you want to insert. Values are specified by literals, either numerical or string literals. A literal is simply a fixed data value. Numerical literals can be specified by simply providing a numerical value. String, that is varchar values, can be specified using single quotes. Some systems allow double quotes or even both, but for consistency we'll use single quotes. The syntax to insert records is to use the keywords insert into, followed by the table name and a comma-delimited list of column names. You specify a value for each of the columns by using the keyword values, followed by another comma-delimited list of literals. The column names and values have a one-to-one correspondence, so the order and number of columns and values that you provide is important. Let's demonstrate how to insert data by inserting records into the book author database that we previously designed. First, let's insert a simple author record, providing the first name and the last name. We didn't need to specify an author ID, as it was automatically generated by the database. We can override this functionality by explicitly providing a primary key value. However, if a record already existed in the database with author ID 1234, this insert would fail. We'll cover how to retrieve data in subsequent videos, but to demonstrate that these records were successfully inserted, I'll select them out of the database. And we can see the results here. To insert a book record, we'll need to provide an author ID specifying the book's author. In these first two examples, I've hard-coded the author ID to 1, the record corresponding to Norman Mailer. Alternatively, we could have retrieved the author ID for a particular author using a nested query. For example, once again, I'll retrieve these records to show that all the inserts were successful. Problems can arise if you attempt to insert records with badly formatted queries. Here the query failed because we didn't escape the apostrophe inside the string literal. To escape, you can simply use a backslash. Problems can also arise if we attempt to insert a record that refers to an invalid record. The insert failed because there is no author with ID 19999. Finally, let's demonstrate what happens when we attempt to insert a record that violates our uniqueness constraint on the ISBN. The database will not allow duplicate entries. Updating data means that we change the column values for records that already exist in the table. We use the update and set keywords, setting column names to a particular literal value. Care must be taken when modifying data. In general, you should always use a where clause along with some condition to limit your changes to only the records that you wish to change. Without a where clause, an update statement would affect every record in the entire table. Let's take a look at some examples. You'll notice that before we misspelled Norman Mailer's first name, inserting the record with normal as a first name instead. Let's correct that by updating the first name of that particular record. If we had not had a where clause, for example, something like this, then it would have set the first name of every single author in the entire database to Norman. Obviously not something that we want to do. In fact, MySQL Workbench prevents us from doing this. We are in safe mode, so we're not able to modify records without a where clause. We also incorrectly inserted the book The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul with Norman Mailer as the author, with author ID 1, when in fact it was Douglas Adams. Let's correct that by updating the author ID of that particular book record. It's now been corrected. Removing records can be achieved using a delete statement. Again, you should only use a delete statement in conjunction with a where clause so that you only delete specific records. If you use a delete statement without a where clause, you will end up deleting every record in the table. The syntax is delete from, then the table name, followed by a where clause. Let's take a look at a few examples. Let's delete that first book record. It's now gone. We can also delete based on other column values. Now both of those books are gone. Let's try to delete an author. The delete failed. The delete failed because the author Norman Mailer was referred to by one or more book records. We cannot delete reference records without first deleting the records that reference them. Now that no books reference the author Norman Mailer, we're now allowed to delete it. In the next part, we'll cover querying data out of the database.